Good evening. So, thanks for staying out so long. So, I'm gonna show you a little bit about how you can use JSR 354 and that it actually can be funny to use, and it's also not very hard to use. So I'm one of the maintenance leads who took over JSR 354 from Credit Suisse. I'm also, after it finished, now the maintenance lead of JSR 385, the units of measurement JSR. Very quick slides, and then since this session is called Tools in Action, I will show you several representative examples of how to use the JSR. So the history and motivation, the monetary values represented by java.util.Currency was never really supported that well, especially it's restricted to the ISO standard currencies. There's no real value type to represent the monetary value, only the currency, and no proper support for currency arithmetic conversion or any other functions. To solve that, you can use the money JSR and its reference implementation Moneta. So a quick overview. The API has several elements, but they're relatively simple. JavaFX Money contains the core API elements like currency unit or monetary amount. The conversion subsystem contains elements like exchange rate, conversion context, or currency conversion. For formatting and parsing, in the format package, there's an amount format context or a monetary amount format. And you can extend it using the SPI, which several users also do. For example, creating your own exchange rate provider. The reference implementation is called Moneta, and the TCK is also under the org Java Money. So far, Oracle has not told us to change or remove the word Java from Java Money, so until this may happen someday, we actually have another domain which is a shorter form just in case, but until that may happen, it will stay at org Java Money unless somebody has something against it. There are several currencies, also in the ISO standard. For example, XXX is nothing dodgy or pornographic. It actually means no currency at all. And there are a couple of other ambiguities. For the sake of time, I'm not going into so much detail, but for example, Indian rupees would be accepted in Nepal, but not the other way around. That's a good example where the locale cannot always directly map to the currency either. The minor units are, in most cases, 1 divided by 100, but there are also others. And of course, the most extreme example might be the Satoshi with Bitcoin. Speaking of Bitcoin, yes, there are also virtual currencies that JSR 354 and its implementations support. The Facebook Libra, well, we still have to see whether or not that will come, but if it does, it may also not come in some countries, but if you followed some of the movement around Bitcoin that has happened just in the last couple of days, and I'm not talking about the possible bankruptcy of the self-acclaimed Satoshi, I'm actually talking about the sudden rise of Bitcoin, fueled by some statements by the Chinese government, and both the Chinese government and also even the European Union made some suggestions that they may also create their own cryptocurrencies that are regulated by the state. So at some point in the future, we may even see certain cryptocurrencies that are linked to a particular locale like China or countries in the EU. At the moment, that's not the case, but our JSR would also be ready for that. And then there are other local currencies. The one with David Bowie is actually a real currency, but it's only used locally. The Javafx franc, we will come to that during our demos. So it's not just a nice UI gimmick here. I will actually show you during the demos how you can define your own currency, which will also use the Javafx franc as an example. Or the Bristol pound would also be another local currency that's only used, for example, in a particular city or a region. But some of them even printed paper bills that can be used for payment. Precision and rounding is very important. The internal precision is usually the most precise one available. Of course, there are different representations, and it depends on your use case. For example, we have the fast money type, which is backed by a long value. So it's faster because it's backed by primitive types. And for ultimate scale of numeric values, the normal money type is backed by a big decimal, which of course is a little less fast if you need real-time trading, but then you can fit in even the US deficit. Only the internal rounding is automatically applied. Everything else is subject to customization and configuration. Here another case of rounding, for example, in Argentina. There are very special rounding cases, like to round up by 3 digits and round down. So these are not very standard ways of rounding, but it's also possible to model these in the framework. The conversion, thanks to a very good Wi-Fi so far, I can also show you the conversion during the live demos, but especially when you call them first, the exchange rates are also cached in a local cache. So even if there should be a problem with the Wi-Fi, we would still get very recent values from this morning. The JSR has been adopted quite a lot. Spring, since Spring Framework 4, Spring Framework and all the dependent technologies like Spring Boot, and I also saw this new Spring Init project that is still in incubation. They all support Java Money. So the Spring type converters automatically out of the box. If you add the Money JSR and its reference implementation, then Spring would automatically support monetary type conversions. I also spoke to Graham during his Micronaut talk, and he said currently it's not out of the box, but it's also possible with other frameworks like Micronaut or Quarkus. Hibernate validator, thanks to Zalando, which also created a few other supporting projects like the Jackson JSON binding, and they created a bean validation support, which was now contributed to the actual Hibernate validator project. And for cyber currencies and cryptocurrencies, the Hyperledger project also uses the Java Money API in certain aspects. Okay, now let's go to the live demo. Is the font size okay also in the back? Yeah, great. So we have a few examples. The most basic one would be to create a currency unit. Not very spectacular. So first we take the currency code And the second example would be a currency by a locale. So in this case, you get the official currency that's supported in the US, which is the US dollar. Now let's add some value. So this is the logging information which precision is actually applied. Currencies. Okay, as I promised, now we come to the custom currencies. So there are two ways. In this case, we simply define a new currency unit and then override all the necessary methods on the fly. So here we got the Javafx wrong. Or we could use a builder. And then also apply, for example, here, this is fictionless, but the Javafx franc would be the DXF. And here you also see the builder that's used and the meta information that has been applied using the builder in this case. Monetary operations. Here are the most basic operations. Most of them modeled pretty much after the big decimal or big integer types. So they are very familiar and they are as intuitive as possible. I think we left a few weird ones out, like ALP. I'm not sure if we actually support that, but most of the pretty common ones like add, subtract, and others, plus a few, like here you can see is greater than or equal. Those are additional useful methods that do not exist in the big decimal as of now, at least, unless Java 14 or 15 start adding those as well. The next example shows some lambda and filtering. Yeah, so here using filtering a number of amounts, actually with different currencies here, are filtered and sorted, applying the Java Lambda functionality that's available since Java 8. Yeah, the same with... Oops. Here another one. This is actually just with dollars, so I slightly renamed the internal factory method. Since we are in a cinema here, Why not? Okay, group. Yeah, this one again has multiple currencies. And here it applies several statistical methods. So these are just the very basic ones. There's actually in a separate module called Java Money Libraries. You can find and use quite a few financial methods So in the calculation, there are several formulas that are common to mathematical and financial calculations. So there's not enough time here, but I will at least show you some of the examples here. So they are quite sophisticated for the financial industry in banking or insurance. And they use the same lambda functions, so they are extension functions. There are some of the functions that are available out of the box in Moneta, and these are extension functions if you need more sophisticated, for example, down payment calculations for loans and mortgages and stuff like that. Okay, then let's go to formatting. This is again a very simple example, but it shows applying several different formatters. The first one would be the German locale. So it uses the German or European style comma. And the second one uses the US locale, so it will also use the format that's common to the United States. And the last one is a custom format created using a builder, where you can combine various aspects. Yeah. And here there's a feature that we're actually about to add into the upcoming maintenance release. So in version 1.4 of Moneta, what's done here should actually be a little more simple by simply applying the Indian locale. But here I also show you an example how you can use the adaptive formatter and grouping sizes to apply format changes, for example, in this case, specific to India and other nearby countries. So the first one is the simple formatter, in this case, based on the English style comma. and then the separator groups, each of them 3 digits. And then you see the Indian number formatting where you have 3 digits in the first group, but then it switches to 2 digits from then on. As you could see, most of those are also available in the so-called backport. So for the version 1 of the Money JSR, we have a backport that supports everything that's appropriate. Of course, you won't be able to use certain things like lambdas because they don't exist in Java 7, but everything else, the API, works the same way both in Java 7 in the backport. For a follow-up version that I'll show you in a slide a few ideas that we have in mind after the maintenance release, so that will probably be sometime next year when we plan a new version under a new JSR, and that will actually use the multi-release jar, so there will only be one API and one implementation, and anything that needs to be backward compatible will be accomplished using the multi-release jar feature of Java 9 and above. So here I'm only showing the Java 8 plus version, by the way. So here we get several out-of-the-box exchange rate providers. So the first one is the European Central Bank, from Euro to Swiss franc. The second one is the International Monetary Fund. And the last one would be the European Central Bank, but at a particular time, in this case, January 2015. So you can use historic exchange rates as long as the provider that you choose supports them. In some cases, of course, you may also need to switch to a provider that's more precise, or in certain cases you may also need to pay for a provider. But that's why you can create your own exchange rate providers using the SPI. The ones that are out of the box are usually available for free. And here, in this case, it also goes back quite a while. I'm not sure where the European Central Bank starts, but it may actually start almost at the time when the euro was available. So here's another example showing the conversion chain. So unless you make changes to the conversion chain, there's usually a chain that's defined in the Java Money properties file. So if you change that locally, you can override it, but there's a default that comes with the reference implementation. And here we get some of those exceptions because in certain providers it's not possible to convert from one currency to another. Especially in the European Central Bank, there are certain exchange rates that are usually bound to the euro. So you cannot always use other currencies than the euro. And here we will also have an example of trying to use the Brazilian real, and I'm not sure what TND actually is, but the two of them cannot be converted into each other. Okay, then let's go to the UI. I have two examples. The first one is a project that we inherited some years ago, a Swing-based personal money app. It's more or less a proof of concept, but it has almost all the features that you may have known from Quicken or Microsoft Money when they still existed. Actually, I think Quicken is still around, but I think it's now also in the cloud, or does it still exist? So even though there's no multi-currency here, but you can define which currency you want for your accounts. So yeah, it's a small application running in Swing. We also have a few JavaFX demos, but most of them are demos that show code snippets, and I rather wanted to show you the code in the IDE. But there are also some JavaFX demos. Of course, there's a little caveat. You need to make sure that you use a particular version of Open JavaFX that matches the JDK version, because it's no longer part of the JDK. That's also one of the reasons, because I'm running it against Java 11 here, and that's why it would be a little harder to get the right JavaFX version. So from the Swing bean, let's move to what used to be called web beans with Jakarta EE. This is an example that was created by Red Hat and JBoss quite a while ago, and we added a little bit of magic, especially here. You can see the currency unit, and the monetary amount. There's still a big decimal, which is sort of a mirror, but what you actually see on the web UI is mostly representing the monetary amount. So let's start it. In the master of the Java Money demos, which is the develop branch, if you want. So we have a sort of more stable legacy branch that uses the 1.3.0 version, and the master uses the snapshot of 1.4, which will be released as soon as we launch the maintenance release 1 of the JSR, which will also fix the license issue. By the way, that has already been fixed. So we plan to do this as soon as the executive committee has been re-elected or newly elected. Yeah. So this is very simple. Most of it has been defined by Red Hat a little while ago, so it's not very nicely and appealing, but it shows what it's supposed to show. So first of all, we have a credit operation, and the amount is formatted using the money JSR, and we can also do a debit operation. There's not much more that you can do here, but you will see here in the payment handler that it uses the JSR under the hood in the payment bean. Okay, wow, perfect timing. So this is more or less the roadmap for an upcoming future JSR that we plan to file as soon as we address some of the historic issues left by Credit Suisse. So when the maintenance release 1 of JSR 354 is approved, then we plan to file a new JSR, probably version 2, now that everybody jumps with major versions. You're welcome to participate. Here are some of the links. And speaking of executive committee, both I and Todori Spice, who was kind enough to create that nice folder. So if you like a JAK, or if you're a member of a JAK, the Utrecht JAK runs for an associate seat, and I'm also running for an associate seat, and there's also a couple of other good candidates. So yeah, if you're an associate member of the JCP, then the EC election actually starts tomorrow. So I would be happy if some of you voted for us, and if you want to participate in the JSR itself, then we would also appreciate to see you either as the contributors, or if you're not an associate member, then maybe even a member of the expert group. Okay, I think there's almost no time for questions. Is there one question?
Is there a standard for database persistence?
There is an extension, I think it's called Jadira. So there's a project called Jadira that does the same support. I didn't mention them because their name is not as well known as, for example, Zalando, but Jadira has done the same that Zalando did for JSON persistence, but for JPA and Hibernate. So yes. I think it's also on the links on our Java Money page. You will find it there. Okay, I guess the time is up, so thanks for coming here at such a late evening time, and if you have any further questions, then please feel free to use our Groups.io forum, or if you have suggestions for the API, then use GitHub.